All right, so as you may already know, this is a breakout session on in-ear monitor mixing. And so I'm often surprised how often I talk to somebody about in-ear monitor mixes and just ask questions. And there's like, when Nathan asked me, I just really don't know what to ask for. Anybody been there? You're just like, I just don't even know what to. Yeah, okay, this is good. We're being humble, being honest. That's good. I love Andy. He's been playing here for like 20 years. He raises his hand. That's awesome. Yeah, and then I think as we thought about doing this breakout session, the obvious person to do this is Mr. Nathan Bong, because Nathan is the guy who sits behind the desk, but he is also the guy who knows a lot of the physics of sound and the way that frequencies work, and he's able to speak into, in a really practical way. Yeah, she had it.
I created the physics.
Yeah, I created. And so I'm not going to talk very much. I'm going to hand over to Nathan. Can we give a round of applause for Nathan as he talks to us about in-ear monitor mixes.
Cool, guys. How many of you guys are gluten-free? Those cookies are terrible. I'm sorry. Man, you're missing out on all the good things in life. Those are... Wow. Yeah, okay. I was just sitting here as you were talking. I was like, man, I'm not enjoying this cookie at all. And then he listened to everything you were saying, too, so of course. Guys, man, thanks for being here. I do want to roll this mic down just a little bit. I feel like I'm hearing myself ring. The controls are not in my hands right now. Thank you. So we're going to talk just a little bit about this topic of setting your in-ear monitors. And we kind of toyed around. We've had this conversation for a long time. And just like Jacob said, I think one of the things I hear often is just like, man, can you just listen to my mix? I have no idea how to, but I just can't understand things right now. And that's okay. Like, that's an okay place to be. We just don't want to leave you there. The same way, like, we talk about, like, coming to this place, like, man, it's okay to not be okay. It's just not okay to stay there, right? Same kind of thing. Now, that's probably, like, over-spiritualizes the whole in-ear monitor thing, like, way down the nth degree. But Jonah's like, yeah, you can back off that one a little bit. But for real, though, it's okay not to know. So what we want to try to educate you guys a little bit is, as you go from this place or even just interact in our ministries, that you kind of have an idea of like, okay, I think I feel at least maybe 10% confident kind of navigating some waters now. One of the emails that I get, I don't want to say frequently, I feel like I've had several of them since we've started planning churches, musicians who have played on our teams that then they go out and plant in either, this year was Lawrence and Madison, and I got calls or texts and emails back that were saying, hey, I'm responsible for setting my own mix now. I don't know what I'm doing. Can you just give me a grunt? So I sent an email back about like, hey, here's what I would do if, you play bass. So kind of trying to give a framework. They're like, next week, they're like, oh man, that was so much better. Thank you. I just didn't. That's okay. So thinking like, man, we get that a lot. So what if we tried to educate? So there's 100 different ways to do this, and we're not expecting you guys to be audio engineers, but we spend a fair amount of time and money, of the church's resources, just trying to provide great tools from the instruments down through the way they come into the soundboard and the way they go out of the soundboard, and even to in-ears that we provide. Some of you guys have your own in-ears, which is cool and awesome, and if you're interested in like getting your own in-ears, talk to us and we can help you think through some of that. There might be some options available where we can scholarship some things like that, and that's actually been a huge thing. It actually kind of takes the ownership of like your craft one step further. Same way like a guitar player would own his guitar or his pedals and things like that, even vocals. Like, oh man, I think you guys would find a lot of benefit out of having your own in-ears. I'm probably speaking for people who have, there's several of you in the room who have your own, and it makes a big difference, I know. But even these in-ears they're expensive. And we do that to try to provide the most distraction-free environment for you guys to lead worship in our environments. I'm trying to read through my notes here too as I'm going. I've been distracted today, so I apologize. Might be a little fragmented tonight, but we want you guys to be set up most effectively so you can lead our church before the throne of the Creator. I mean, that's a big deal, right? There's a holy way with taking that platform and leading sometimes up to 2,000 people in this room at kickoffs and conferences and retreats. There's well over 2,000 people in the room. And there is a holy way with that. It's something we want to take seriously. So how can I, as a production manager, try to put systems in place that allow you to thrive and succeed in these areas? So you're actually musically inspired too, to be able to enter in the same way, not just like put on a facade and go out there and lead, but how do I actually provide systems for you to be able to thrive in that area, to be able to lead people before the God that captivates, right?
So are you saying that if people really, really want changes to their mix all the way through the entirety of rehearsal, you're okay with that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
gosh, man, that's the thing. I think some people get, and I'm this way too, but like, oh man, I don't want to make another request. I feel like all I've done tonight is make requests. That's okay. I think I'd speak for all of, at least my team of audio guys, and if I'm not, I'm going to be speaking for them now. They would say, let us know. And like, if it's still not right, even if it's in between, like a break, pull me aside, just, hey, something's still, I don't know what it is. And it might be hard for you to articulate even, like, I don't know what I'm hearing, and help us walk you through that, because we want to make sure it's right for you. We want to make sure that you have a good experience in your ears. Now, that is, what's the word I'm looking for? That is, a good experience in your ears is probably somewhat, there's a word I'm going for right now, I can't find it. Objective. It's kind of an objective thing. So some people think like, oh, yeah, when I drive down the road and listen to Kanye and I'm singing along, we don't do Kanye here on the weekend, so maybe whatever. But maybe you're listening to the latest Disney album or something, but you're singing along with it, right? And you're like, man, this is a killer mix, and it's a great CD quality mix. Man, we're not trying to shoot for a CD quality mix in your ears, and actually that's probably the least helpful thing actually in your ears. So kind of as we start talking about mixes, I think that's often a misconception, is people are like, man, it just didn't feel like when it did when I was listening at home. Well, I hope it doesn't, actually. I mean, and you might be confused by that, and that's okay. When you're on the platform, our environments are loud, unashamedly. They are, there's a lot of, I'll talk about information. We'll say there's a lot of information coming through. That just means like a lot of volume, a lot of signal, a lot of noise. It's a kind way of saying noise. There's a lot of information coming through the mics. And when we have a lot of open mics on the stage in a loud room like we have, the more mics you have open, just the more information you have coming in your mix. So like we start to kind of talk about what can you take out of your mix. So before you even start asking for like a mix request, the first thing we would say is like, is there something you could take out, right? Because there's some things that are what we call mix destroyers, which would be like all the things that are really popular in Christian worship right now, which is like the pads and the tracks and the synths and all these things that like actually really fill it out and make it a really great mix. But good night, man. They are going to eat you alive, and they're going to eat your mix and swallow you whole. There's so much, there's so full range that you will lose any frame of references, like where your voice is in the mix. So we kind of start kind of feathering those out. Now, unfortunately, once you start pulling all those out, it's like, well, my mix is pretty empty right now. So there's a difference that we want to split, but those are things that we talk about, mix killers, is like, man, trying to create space. As humans, we can hear a finite frequency spectrum. So we don't have infinite hearing.
Physics.
Here we go. So strap in, baby. So we have finite frequency spectrum we can hear. And really, as audio engineers, a lot of people think we're just kind of like mixing volume. We're actually like managing frequency, most of it. At least the good engineers are managing frequency. Sometimes people are just chasing volume, but you should be managing frequency, right? We're trying to say, okay, vocals are in this part of the frequency spectrum, a guitar is in this part of the frequency spectrum, but sometimes they're here, and the vocals and the guitar can compete. So I might take frequencies out of the guitar to allow the vocals to kind of sit out a little more prominently. Otherwise, everything's just competing, and it just gets louder and louder and louder and louder and louder. And those gatherings, you usually kind of walk away and you're like, man, it was loud. And usually what people say when they mean like, oh man, it was loud, is like, it was harsh. There was a lot of high frequencies that were like, just hitting me right here. Like, gosh, this is not pleasant to listen to, right? Same thing in your ears. It might be like, it hurts, right? So how do we manage those things? So we'll try to create space in your mix to start out with. We want to create space so you can hear things. So like I said, before you are asking for more or something, maybe think about like, hey, what could I actually use less of right now? And the answer might be nothing. That's an okay answer. It's not like, oh gosh, I don't know. I actually don't think there's anything I need less of. That's an okay answer, but at least give it the cognitive reasoning to say, actually, maybe I don't, there's 2 acoustics. I really don't need one of them. I mean, and this isn't ever a like, it gets awkward, right? Everybody's like, oh gosh, this is awkward. No, but it's funny. It's like, even when you start talking about vocals, there's like, one of the things we say to make room in your mix is like, hey, if there's a vocal who's just like, is background vocals this week, we tell the backline, just pull them down. Or pull them down, even pull them out. And that's not a like, oh gosh, they sound really bad. Can you just take them out of mix? That's not that at all. And it's like, it gets awkward on stage. It's like, oh, pulling her out, eh? It's, come on. No, like, we love each other. We're trying to say, how do I best succeed again? How do I set you up to be, how does it a win for you to come out and lead worship for the church? And the way that we can do it is like, man, create space so you can hear things, so you can turn your mix down, right? We talk about in-ear monitors. There's been this trend over the last decade. When Andy started here, man, Andy, are you the longest probably team member? You're probably in this room. You're probably the longest one on this team, right? 50 years.
Doesn't look a day over 21.
Andy's been playing on our teams. We were saying earlier, it's almost 20 years, right? Yeah, that's crazy. So you were playing here, probably had wedges, right? We had the floor wedges out, just screaming. Yeah, that was amazing. So floor wedges, right? And we've moved to in-ears. And one of the things, the reason we moved to in-ears and the constant argument is like, it's supposed to protect your hearing more. The wedges are screaming at you and like, well, the funny thing about that is like, people are now getting hearing damage from like earbuds and everything in their ears. It's like, okay, so again, how do I create space in your mix so you can turn your mix to a reasonable volume so you're not going deaf, right? Even in these little in-ears that we supply to you guys, there is a silver circle. I don't know what circle. There's a silver cylinder shoved in this thing, and what it's actually doing is it's a synthetic eardrum. It's moving as you get sound pressure into your ears. When you shove something in your ears, the sound pressure is hitting your eardrum, and what that's doing is it's actually taking the pneumatic pressure off your eardrum, and it's sending it out this port. So all of the actual pressure is not on your eardrum, so you can actually, your eardrum is actually able to hear more frequency spectrum because the actual pressure isn't on your ear. Again, these cost more money than standard in-ears, and down the South Auditorium we use a cheaper version. But we do this because we say, man, your hearing is important to us, right? We don't want you to walk away from 4 years of ministry through Salt Company and you're like, cool, I can't hear anymore, right? That's not a win. Jesse Alleman, good night, man. I don't know how that his pack is like on stun all the time. And I'm like, man, I don't know how to help you, bro. But like, he's just, his mix is so loud, and we tried to back it down, but it's just loud. So it's always one of those like, how do we have a conversation about how to preserve hearing? Because you can hear a finite frequency spectrum, and your hearing can dissolve over time, right? A lot of you guys are quite younger than I am, and you can actually hear more than I can. So there's times, even Jacob Johnson, he'll be like, oh man, you hear that? I'm like, no, I can't hear that anymore. I'm the mid front house guy. I can't hear past 16K. I don't know what that is. But it's all this like high frequency stuff that like way up high that I'm like, oh, people younger than me can hear that. That's great. I can't. There's a few different things. So as we walk through, how do we create space in the mix, right? Mic position is another good thing. If you're a vocal, and even I guess like drums, we try to set the mics on the drums and things like that in a good spot so you're maximizing what it sounds like. But if you're on vocals, if you kind of notice how even how I'm holding the mic right now, there's always like the old rule of thumb is like, yeah, kiss the mic, right? It's not super helpful actually, because that can actually, as it gets really loud right now, and there's even low frequencies that kind of start to build in there. There's something called proximity effect. Strap in, again, we're going deep. Proximity effect literally just means that like as this capsule gets closer to me, like the low frequencies start to swell and build. So actually kind of staying about this far off, kind of the two fingers, is actually a really good place to be, and it's a really balanced place. Most of you will actually use a capsule that looks like this round kind of capsule. Some of you use ones that are square and flat on top. Similar kind of effect. And the further and further you get away from this mic, the quieter and quieter it gets. And that's also, like, we use these because we have live drums now on our stage. We don't have the Pope Mobile on our stage anymore, right? That's backstage as a practice room. So with live drums, getting mics that are really close, like that shut down drums around and stay right here, is important. So that's why a lot of you guys use this particular capsule. Staying close to the capsule will actually start to muddy up your mix. So staying just a little bit off is actually the best place you can be. So mic position matters. Proximity effect. Again, you don't have to remember these terms are, but kind of be familiar with, like, oh, I guess it's kind of low and woofy. Maybe if hey, that's better. But still projecting. We don't want you out here because this is too far. There's a fine line between how close you can be on those things.
If I could say something. My general observation from what I hear, and especially it's been helpful as Nathan's explained it to me, is that this low-end information, and I'm sure he'll get into that more, it tends to just confuse my mix. Like, the low end just makes it seem like I just can't hear anything, and the high-end stuff, like, is painful. And so I think the low-end stuff is a little trickier because it's harder to put your finger on, okay, what exactly is the contributing factor here? Because it just doesn't feel right. It feels like your mix is, I use the word muddy. That's what I'll say to Nathan. Hey, my mix feels muddy. Like, any ideas what it might be? And he's able to decipher that. But, yeah, kind of the difference between low-end, maybe high-end stuff is what it does to your mix.
That's great. Yeah, the goal, again, is not having a mastered mix like you're singing along with the album in your car. The goal of your mix is to hear clearly what you need so you can successfully play your part as a part of the whole, right? So you can effectively lead the church. The key in that you remember is that you're playing a part as a unit on the stage, right? You may be the star in your ears. You are not the star on the platform. But you might be the loudest thing in your ears, right? It's also not super musically inspiring when you're the only thing in your ears, unless you're a drummer, and then it's pretty cranking. But you need to have enough of each other to be aware of how to stay out of the way. I was listening to somebody this week talk about this, and they're saying, man, I was thinking about at conference, what was that 70s GFR?
God all praise and glory.
Yeah, that thing. To God all praise and glory. It was a really fun song. We kind of a 70s funk tune, and it was interesting because the back half, you guys just like soloed for like 2 minutes, and it was like Daniel did some stuff, and then James is doing some stuff, and then there's like a bass line. So just kind of walking around, and I think that was such a great example of, like, man, I need to have a respective amount of each other in my mix. It doesn't need to mean that they all need to be like slamming, but I need to be able to hear them, figure out if I look at them, okay, I can hear the part. Because as you guys are all soloing around, if you didn't have Daniel in your mix, you would have no idea that he's playing right now, and you're like, oh, cool, I'm gonna go and well, now you got competing parts going on because you're both soloing, and that's not helpful. Again, you're playing as part of a whole, right? Some instruments are not solo instruments, right? Bass guitar is one who's just kind of always a foundation. Drums can be a solo instrument. They usually aren't in worship. Your solo instruments are usually more guitar and things like that. So your mix may be different depending on what instrument you play, and it should be. And we'll talk about kind of, if I play bass, here's what my mix would sound like in just a minute. I talked a few minutes ago about like the acoustic guitar. Man, I get after acoustic guitars on our team a lot. It's kind of funny. Yeah, there's a lot to be said in modern worship about acoustic guitars, but they're not always. There's enough other information that covers the same thing that acoustic guitars are doing in your mix that actually they can muddy up your mix really quick. So if you're the acoustic player, you want to have acoustic in your mix. But if you're the other vocals and the other guitar players, it actually might not be helpful to have acoustic. And that's okay, because it might give some sort of rhythm, right? We talk about in our mixes, and I'll talk about this in a few minutes, that like you want to have pitch, rhythm, and tempo. So I want to have an aspect of rhythm. Where's the song going, right? I need to have pitch, like coming off some sort of absolute reference pitch. So whether it's piano or bass or something. And then tempo, which in our case is click. Excuse me. So it used to be back in the day before clicks existed, it was like everybody keyed off the acoustic guitar. You know, it's campfire-y, it's Christian-y, and things like that. That's just what we do, is we key off the acoustic guitar. In our gatherings, it's not super helpful. So that just might be one thing you might find this week is like, man, might turn down the acoustic a little bit. Acoustic players don't do that, please. But other people, that would probably free up a lot of things, especially, like I said, if there's two, find one that like, okay, I think this guy's playing more. I'm going to pull this one. Don't be afraid to ask for it to pull out, because the goal is for you to clean up your mix. Don't be offended also if somebody asks for you to be out of their mix. We'll just start there and just like, again, I think Kyle, Kyle, are you in here? You're in back. Thank you. You were talking earlier about like, man, as creatives, right? Our craft is an extension of like ourself, and it's so much like, yeah, but why don't they want to hear me? Come on, you know. So I think it's just funny, and I'm a thinker. I'm not a feeler. I'm like the odd man out in like the arts world. So I'm always like, what's the problem? Where the feelers are like, be nice. So it's just funny, but I think it's helpful to think about it that way. Going down my list here. Wait for it. If you have the vocals in your mix at the level of where they are on an album, you'll have a difficult time bringing your mix up to an inspiring level. It's just true. Most of the time, drums, bass, guitars, and things like that, they're going to give you the best kind of frame of the mix and kind of give you the most energy in the mix. If your vocals are the hottest thing in your mix, or not just your vocal, just vocals in general, it can be hard when you start turning your packs. So on our packs, I put them all away, didn't I? Andy, you still have your pack out? Okay, sorry, I blew up. The packs, we usually run our packs about 50% of the way up. So we'll usually say, like, when you're in the main auditorium, I guess the South Auditorium, we have the new packs down there too. So in both venues, with the exception of when we're on retreats, that's a different system. But when we're in this building, usually when we turn our mixes to, when you kind of start setting your mix, turn it like halfway, that's a good place. There's a whole lot of physics and reasons behind why that is what that is, that I'm not going to get into, but yeah. I can grab one for you. I think it's like 5, isn't it? I think it's somewhere like 5, yeah. So even on these are in the box, but anything is Shure who makes these packs. If you kind of start midway, this little white line in the middle, that's a really good place, a safe place to start. Sometimes you might have sensitive ears. Again, that's okay. It might be that that's too loud, which means a couple things. A, we can back down how much we send to your pack, just overall. Because it would still be better for you to run in the middle and for me to back things down at the console, just kind of take your whole mix down, than it would be for me to turn this down. You won't hear as much. Yeah. So if you have sensitive ears, that's okay. Try to keep it here and let us know, and we'll back how much down we send you. Anything else on that? It can also be a fact that like your mix is maybe just not great, and that's what, like, hey man, it's just really hard to listen to at this level. And I'll take a peek and be like, oh yeah, gosh, that's a train wreck. I'm sorry, and we'll try to make some adjustments real quick. We talked a little about things that'll destroy your mix, the ambience, things that are cool and washy. They're cool and washy, but they will destroy your mix. I think the keyboard player has one of the hardest mixes that we have to try to set nowadays, because they're the ones who are controlling all the cool and washy stuff, but they're controlling all the things that actually destroy their mix at the same time.
And their instrument sits like tons of low end all the way up to really high end, so it crowds every frequency.
Totally, it's the full spectrum, right? Yeah. So again, as we talk about finite spectrum, they're like, I need to hear all of it. Not helpful, right? So the keyboard players, I think we've gotten to a good place, and we have in our starting template that we use as audio engineers, we have a starting template we use every week, and we start with that template, and it has kind of mixes built in for as it goes across. There's a worship leader with an electric guitar, female worship leader 2, worship leader support, worship leader with acoustic, electric 1, electric 2, bass. What's next? Keys? No. Graphics? There's an empty, isn't there? Spare, which is like a violin or something like that, or ukulele or didgeridoo. And then graphics, which goes back to our team, and then keys and drums. So those are kind of how they're set up, and it's the same kind of pack. So that's a lot of time. If you sing regularly, you might always be in the same pack. There's a reason why, is because it's probably kind of tuned for how your voice is, and we have other presets we employ. But all those are kind of set up, and they're even they have a certain tone shaping on them so that it benefits you as a vocalist. So the EQ or the tone that's on the electric is going to be different than what's on your vocals. And we do that because what he needs to hear for his electric guitar is different than what you need to hear as a vocalist. I think something that's helpful to know is all the information. There are a lot of channels coming at you, and this is, I think, where sometimes it gets confusing. People are like, man, I don't know what to change in my mix because sometimes you don't even know what's available for you to change in your mix, right? I've seen a lot of nods. So as I was thinking about that this week, know that if pretty much everything on the platform has a mic on it. So like there's 10 mics on the drums. You can control all of them. So you can take the toms out. You can add more kick. You can add more of the inside of the kick, the outside of the kick, the bottom of the snare, the top of the snare. I mean, we have a tremendous amount of control. So if you think like, man, I feel, again, I might not know what to ask, but like, I want less cymbals. We can do that. We can take all the cymbals out of your mix. We can leave the kick and the snare and the toms there, which are going to give you some good boom and musically inspiring mix. We can the guitars. We have a tremendous amount of control there. So I think know that pretty much everything. Electric 1, 2. There's track electrics. There's click. There's Martha, I think I've called her, the guide gal. It's like intro. Her, right? She's the one always yelling at you. Worship freely. Left hand, now right. It's like, wow, she's baptized. So she can get a little carried away sometimes. She's also very loud. Is Russell still in any of them? He's man of sorrows, right? That's Russell, that one. That's Martha through auto-tune or something. I don't know. But so we can turn them down. They're independent from click, right? Sometimes it's like, that is super loud. I guess, do you want to talk a second on click, even as we're on that? We run a lot of click on our mix, right? Yeah. Why?
Yeah, I think my rule of thumb when I'm setting click is I want it to hurt and then hurt a little bit below hurting. If that makes sense.
It hurts so good.
And so I want it to be as loud as it possibly can, actually. That sounds really ridiculous. I want it to be as loud as it possibly can before it's hurting my hearing, actually, because you need to hear the click. Like, really just baseline, important musical concept that we stay together rhythmically. Shocker. But having the click really loud in your mix is really important. And so at no point, I use the word buried, at no point should the click get buried in your mix by other stuff. Like, when the band gets to a full band, you shouldn't lose the click. You still should be able to hear it. So that's why sometimes, like, when I'm setting stuff for that first round, I know I'm like, okay, that seems really loud, but it doesn't hurt. I know at about that point, when everything else comes in, I'll still be able to hear the click. So that's kind of my strategy.
And acoustic sets, when there's fewer inputs, right, there's less information coming at you, we can turn down the click a little bit because it's set for when we have our full band arrangements. So it might be that we do in a communion set, and it's like you come out of communion, it's an acoustic and a piano, and you're like, holy cow, just got to get through this, But again, what you're saying, it does start to kind of drop in there. Drums, you should have a really good reference of click in there, certainly, because your main job as a drummer is to keep time, right? All the other fills and ditties and things are just fun, but your primary job is to keep time. So you are the click for the church at that point. Vocals, if you have too much of yourself in your mix, there's two things that can happen, actually. One, you won't sing out as well as you need to, as we need you at front of house. So front of house is the sound booth. It's what they call, I don't know. It's in the front of the house.
In the back.
It's in the back of house, actually, which is weird. But so at front of house, we're looking for how we're mixing for the church, for the room, right? And there's times where we're like, man, I cannot turn up their mic anymore, because you might actually have so much of yourself in your ears that you're like, well, I can hear myself just fine. I'm going to sing kind of quieter. So be kind of cognizant of that. If you can, we don't ever want you guys to over-sing or to blow out your voices. That is unhealthy. We don't want to provide a condition where that's ever a thing. But we do expect you guys to sing out strong and sing out forte, right? There's times to sing pianissimo and mezzo forte and all the other all the other musical terms that I once took in theory. But the forte doesn't mean loud. Forte means strong. So we want you singing strong, right? Because the more you sing, the better mic position you practice. The more headroom you'll have in your mix for when you actually need more of yourself. And actually, the more we can turn down kind of what's coming into your mic and get some more volume out of you before it starts feeding back. So
that's hard because, not to overcomplicate it, but I end up standing stage right a lot of the time, right in front of the drum kit. And what I've found is that I got to turn my mic down quite a bit. And so vocalists, at some point, you might have to learn to become aware of the volume with which you're projecting, regardless of how well you can hear yourself. I would say that's a really great rule of thumb, to just be able to hear yourself, not too loud, not too quiet, but at times those vocal mics are just destroying your mix, and you need to turn it down. Like at conference this year, when I was playing, like I could barely hear everybody's voice, and it was the best in-ear mix I've ever had. I could just hear the band so well. It was awesome. I could barely hear the vocalists. Sometimes that's the best thing. Sometimes it's not. I don't know. So, not to overcomplicate what you're saying. But.
No, that's really good. I'm glad you said that, because that's you speaking as a musician. I'm speaking from the back, right? That's what I know is practical. But you saying, man, this is what I experienced. It's really good. The number two of that as a vocalist, if you actually have too much yourself, this actually blows my mind. And somebody told me this like 10 years ago. You'll actually sing sharp. Usually people sing flat. It'll actually cause you to sing sharp if you have too much yourself. Chew on that. That's a free one. If you're on someone called the backline, so the backline is like drums, bass, guitars, all those things that the band kind of literally on the front line of the backline. Your mixes, the vocals should almost be buried, because you've got click, you've got guide. You should have plenty of the guide. They're telling you where to go. So you should be familiar enough with the song that you actually don't need a lot of vocal in there. Now, it's okay to have vocal in there. I think, gosh, how many years ago was this? Probably 2006, 2007. I had the opportunity to mix ears for David Crowder Band, which before they were Crowder, they were David Crowder Band. And it was really interesting. David was out front. There was a guy named Jack who would play. He had curly, wild hair, and he stood to David's left, and he played electric. And David was center, and then Jeremy Bushwhacker, they called him B-Wack. B-Wack played drums. And it was interesting to me as I mixed their ears and I set them up, because I'd set up kind of a template and things, and then they're asking for requests. And I'm watching what I'm doing as they're mixing their ears and asking for more and less of stuff, and it really caught me off guard. It was the first time I encountered this, and then I encountered it a lot after that. So David and Jack interacted a lot during the show, kind of like the comedic kind of duo of the show, right? And David didn't have really any of Jack's voice in his mix, because it was an open mic downstage. Jack, on the other hand, or not on the, I guess, other side of the stage, didn't have much of David's mic, which blew my mind, because I'm like, you guys are having conversations. How do you not hear each other? Or how can you hear each other? Right? There's just enough bleed through their mic and the PA and things. They could hear each other. B-Wack, who's playing drums, who's holding the whole thing down, keeping time and firing all the tracks and everything like that, he has like none of David's mic. It's the David Crowder Band. I'm like, bro, what are you doing? But it was a case of like, man, we've got clicking guys. We know right where we have to be every single time. We actually don't need those mics, because they just mess up our mix. It's just too much information. I was like, this blows my mind right now. But I've seen that more and more and more. I'm around a lot of touring acts, and I see the way they do their ears. And backline, they don't have a lot of vocal mic in there because they don't need it. Same kind of thing, especially if there's a vocal mic that like, hey, he or she isn't leading his songs this weekend. Man, feel free to pull them out, because it's just one less mic you need to manage. Again, the people that need to have there are probably the vocals, right? And a lot of the vocals, you're trying to do harmonies off one another, and trying to find melody and harmony and all that stuff. The thing that's most helpful in this, I'll leave it with this with harmony. I'll have you talk with harmony for a second, but keying off one another for harmony and melody as a vocalist. If one of you is wrong, you're all going to train wreck. So finding absolute pitch, and we use our bass players. By God's grace, we have a lot of really great bass players around here, and that hasn't always been the case. But I think we're in a good place right now. They're usually right where they need to be on the frets. So it ends up being a pretty good absolute, and it's usually like on the root. So it's easy to key melody and harmony off of where they are at because they're always going to be right where you need them to. That and piano is another place. But as we think about how we arrange music, piano might not always be in a song. So that can be kind of hard because you're like, well, what's the next thing? Well, keys. Yeah, but keys can also destroy my mix. So bass is a good thing, man. As a vocalist, bass is probably the loudest thing in most of your mixes, if I had anything to do with it. Just because it's the right thing. Molly, when she was here leading her mix, she had like herself, and the other vocals are like way down, and then like bass, kick, snare, and then some like guitars in there. And it was a really clean, easy mix. She could always find right where she needed to be, and she led really well as a result of that. I think, yeah, harmony and melody. I think even as we talk about that. Just with 4 vocals on the stage or something like that, I mean, try not to key. If you're trying to say, I need to hear all the harmonies and melodies, how many harmonies and melodies do we usually have?
Well, unofficially, maybe officially, I don't know. Yeah, I think the way that like I think music is right now, it's kind of strange, is that you just aren't seeing multi-part harmonies really anymore. It's typically like just stylistically right now better just to have gang vocals for a majority of the time. So maybe a good rule of thumb is like on verses, the way that we like to do it on verses of songs, it's gang vocals. When you get to chorus, maybe one harmony, but then the rest of the people are doing gang vocals. And so that probably and hopefully gives you an indication of what you need to have in a mix, because if you're going to be singing harmonies a lot, then yeah, you need to be able to hear the melody really well. But actually, if you're singing melody a lot of the time, you just need to hear the absolute really well. You don't need to hear the other vocal mics because you're not keying off another person's voice. You're keying off the instrument. So,
yeah, I think as we think about that too, like a lot of the church isn't singing multi-part harmony, right? The people in the seats, they're pretty average people.
We don't have hymn books at Cornerstone.
No.
We threw them away.
But Cottage Grove probably, no, I'm just kidding. Do they? Does Cottage Grove have hymn books? I imagine they probably would. They do. Yeah, exactly. It's stylistically different, right? So that's even across the network. In Cedar Rapids, something like that too. The music we're doing at Cornerstone is different which was just really cool how God has done that across our network, like just contextualizing the communities that we're in. Everybody's church is a little bit different, which is super cool. So as we talk about things, it's more like how we are here. Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about your actual mix. So I play drums. Okay. So I do, but I'm saying, okay, right now so I play drums, drums and bass. Your mixes are kind of similar. You're the foundation, right? So kick, snare, toms, big, inspiring that way. Bass players, somebody may never told you, like you actually play with the kick drum. That's actually like you move together because as you move and the kick moves with you, you produce impact. So when you two lock together, it's super impactful, super clean, makes for a really cool mix. So bass players, you should have a lot of kick, and drummers, you should have bass guitar reciprocally. That's reciprocally? Is that the word? There it is. Across that. So it drives impact when you guys are together. Electric guitars, we usually have 2 electric guitars. Sometimes we only have one. Sometimes we pull the other one from the track, or sometimes it might be a ton of pads or something like that. But usually electric guitars, you guys, the way we do it is if you're on stage left, your guitar is kind of like 15% in your left ear, and then the other guitar is 100% your right, and then vice versa on the other side. You're 15% to the right, the other guitar is 100% to your left, and that allows you to see. What we find is that when things are dead center in your mix, this one's free. If it's hard for you to hear something, tip it one side or the other like 5 or 10%. Just say, hey, can you move my voice 5% to one side? Because I'll leave the complicated terms out of it, but it's easier to find it in your mix if it's just a little bit off. Your brain it finds it so much easier. It's crazy. It doesn't make any sense to me. But it's like, oh, suddenly it finds it really quickly. So that might be something, if you're having a hard time hearing something, click even is getting buried, just tip it one side or the other. It actually might really help your mix. But guitars, make sure you can hear each other. Keys and electrics. Piano and acoustic quickly can flam. Flamming is a drum term. It kind of means like you're together and then like it's just a little bit off. that's flamming. So it's like it's not together. It's just a little bit. It's not hitting together. So piano and acoustic, when you guys are both doing very rhythmic things, that can quickly flam and it quickly muddies up the whole mix. So it's just be cognizant. If you're playing piano, you might want to have more acoustic or vice versa. We talked about vocals, bass, reference pitch, all those things. Yeah, bass, acoustic, electric, keys. Yeah. One of the last few things I want to talk about is just keeping both ears in. Most of you guys actually do a really good job of this. And probably just because we try to correct it as much as we can. And it goes back to the thing on hearing safety. There's a thing called binaural summation, and you don't have to remember that, but you should remember what it actually is. And what it's saying is there's actually, when you pull one ear out, there is a perceived difference of about 6 dB. So 3 dB is twice as loud. Actually, it's actually twice the acoustical energy. So it's like 4 times quieter when you pull one ear out. So now if the room's loud enough, you're risking damage to this ear. But this one actually, it's just getting slammed. The ear's still got it in. So you have a perceived loudness difference, and it can actually not only throw off your equilibrium, but it can really damage your hearing because you're now like, hey, I'm going to turn that up a little more here because I can't hear because of the room competing. So there are times when it is super appropriate. Like, hey, man, it's a huge thing at the end. We're about done with this thing. We're going to pull it out. I want to sing with it. I want to hear the room better. Man, again, what's your primary job? You're a worship leader. We're all worship leaders. You guys are the most visible worship leaders because you're on the platform, right? How do I effectively set up systems so that you can lead our church most effectively? Well, I want to create mixes that enable you to keep both ears in because I care about your hearing. And I care about keeping your hearing intact. So there are times, like I said, to pull them out is great, but just let us work with you to get to a place where you can keep your ears in. We have ways, audience mics, effects that can kind of simulate, because man, when you put those ears in, it's like, suddenly the whole world shuts down in your head. So how do we open it back up so it feels like you're actually participating in the experience of the room? That's a big deal for me. I want you to feel like you're in the room. We work hard to build a bridge between the booth and the stage. From a production standpoint, where we try to create, even Suckerman, you guys are doing a great job with this. Even beforehand, production and band are both in the same room going through like a devotion thing on Wednesday nights and things like that beforehand. The same reason we have production and band and anybody on the service programming and platform on Sunday mornings, because we're one team, right? Same team, Farva. We're one team, right? And we want to have our audio people feel like they're the N+1 member of the band, right? So it's like they're the 9th person on the stage if there's 8 people. They're the 5th person if there's 4, right? They're always the one more on the stage. So we want to try to build that bridge. Kyle, can you put up that slide? There is a slide, and I'll post this somewhere. I don't know if you can see the words across the top. So we talk, like bass or LF or low frequency. Those are things you'll hear us say, and there's mids and then highs and high mids. These are the things that hurt over here. These are the things that are really warm and can also really get woofy real quick. You can hear that whole spectrum. Like I said, I can't hear all the way that way. But this glossary of terms, and this is not a Bible of terms, but if you're trying to help build a mix and you're like, man, I don't know, something's just off. If you can maybe articulate, like, man, let us in the audio world be the ones that kind of like have to translate what you're trying to say and try to make sense of it. We don't want you guys to have to own the burden of like, how do I speak their language? Let me figure out how to translate for you guys. And I might say, so let me try something here. Did this help? Oh yeah, that's actually way better. Okay, and then maybe I might pull you aside and say, hey, here's actually what I did. Systematically, maybe that's something you're struggling with every single time. You're like, what did you do? Because every single time I have that problem, man, let me help you understand that so you know what to ask for next time. But this is just kind of a thing that says, something's just biting or it's crunchy or it's harsh or it's muddy. Man, it's super warm. Like as you have mental pictures as you kind of look at these terms, probably. The area, it's that high air and stuff like that. So thinking about something like this, again, we can post this somewhere, but words that are kind of like layman's terms that we all kind of speak as like a neutral language are super helpful. Say, man, it's really woofy. Like you were saying, like when you get right up on the mic, and it's like, man, my mix is muddy. I don't think muddy's up there, is it? No. But I know what muddy is. It's down in that warm, punchy body area. It's like, it's muddy. Okay, it's just kind of, it's miry. Yeah. Yeah. So let us translate for you if you're looking to. Yeah, man. Lots of information there.
Yes, and we're way over time. Let me just say, if you are having issues with in-ear monitor mixes, know that the door is open for further conversations between engineers, between any of the worship leaders on staff, or somebody who's maybe a seasoned veteran volunteer who would just love to help you. Because there's further things we can talk about, like panning and the different things that are even in the mix. Like, you know, in our tracks, like we have a couple different groups, 4 different groups within the multi-tracks that we play. And so those are 4 different things that you can actually control within your in-ear monitor mix. And so we're out of time, unfortunately, to be able to go into all those things. But any last thoughts, Nathan?
We have probably 2.5 minutes for questions if we want to do something real quick. Do you want to just do it? If anybody has a question.
Burning.
Yeah. Totally. So you could ask for more vocal effect. Is something we actually have something that actually makes it feel like you're more in the room. When you communicate, there's natural reverb. But when you put your in-ears in, all the reverb's gone, right? So we're trying to recreate it. We do have audience mics, and we're working on a better way to get those back into your mix. We used to have them in there. The guys that were on the I guess Jenny, you were on Fall Retreat. Everybody we had them on. Was that Fall Retreat, Davis? We had them. Yeah, Eric. Yeah.
Oh,
everybody,
so
you guys that came off Fall Retreat, are like, I don't know what you did, but like everything
awesome.
was different. It was amazing. So we're like, okay. And the goal is to get audience mics back in there so you can actually, man, when the room celebrate at the end of a song, I want you to hear that. I don't want you to have to like, oh, they're celebrating. Put my ear back in. Like, that's not helpful.
That's what I do.
Yeah. So we're working on getting the right mics and the right placement and things like that. But that will be something eventually we can add more audience mic would be what you'd be asking for.
Yeah, and I'd also say try to represent the space you're in on stage with panning. And so, especially if you're a vocalist in the middle, pan people who are actually on your left to your left, people who are actually on your right to your right. And that actually has a cool way of like making it feel, oh, like the sound is coming from the direction and the place that person's at. And that actually makes it feel pretty realistic to me. But one more question.
Yeah. That was a good one.
Nice.
Yeah.
Don't drop the mic.
Yeah. Cool, guys. Yeah, guys, thanks. I know there was a tremendous amount of stuff coming at you at that. Sort through, find one thing, information. There it is. I tried not to use that word, but I walked through the door. You opened it. Guys, yeah, ask questions. Let us help you. Let the audio staff try to help you guys. Yeah, we want you. You guys do a fantastic job leading our church. This is a great place to worship. It's a great place to be. And we want to make it enjoyable for you too. So it's like, man, I'd rather be out in the room worshiping because it sounds way better than it does in my ears. Yeah, so let us help you guys. So thanks for serving, guys. Thanks for being here tonight. Clap, sure.
Have a good night.